let's talk about numbers. So we're going to start this video off by talking about simple numbers. So we've got integers. So an integer, as previously explained, is just a full number. So an integer could be the number 1, it could be the number 42, it could be the number 1,000, 100 million, billion, it could be a googolplex. It could be any full number that does not have a decimal in it. So 3 is a full number, but 3.0 is not a full number. So let's go ahead and assign a variable, let's say age is equal to 30, a full number. And if we display that age, it just says 30. Now we can also explore what this data type is. If you're ever curious about what the data type is, let's say for whatever reason you're working with some code and you don't know that age is equal to 30. Could be anything at this point in time. Go ahead and use the type function. So type parentheses, put your variable in there, and then close your parentheses. And you will see that it is an int. That is an integer, and that's what I was saying at the beginning. An int is a full number. Now, let's say you have a really big number. If I said num is equal to this number, could you tell me exactly what that number is just by looking at it, like instantly? Maybe you can. If you can, you are unique because I cannot do that. I personally have to count the zeros. I have to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But Python gives us a nice way to deal with large numbers. So in most programming languages, you cannot simply just add a comma. This doesn't work, and you can actually see the syntax highlighting breaks. It goes from green to red to green to red to green to red. That's not going to work. And let's try this. That's not a number. So what if we do type num? It's actually a tuple. Interesting. Well, we don't want that because we want an actual number. Maybe we're going to add a number. Maybe we're going to say, if you're over 21, you can drink alcohol in the United States. If you're over 18, you can vote in any country. Tuple is not going to allow us to do that. Tuple says 100, 0, 0, 0. That's hard to compare. That's not as simple as, are you greater than 18? But instead what we can do is, because Python gives us this nice little feature, we can use underscores. So let's go ahead and rerun this cell, rerun that one, rerun this one, and we can now see that it is still an integer. And all this underscore does is it allows us, the reader, to understand what we're looking at. So if you have a large number like this, say 100 billion, you can actually format it like 100 billion, and the computer will still understand that it's still an integer. All right, let's move on to floats. Floats. Now, a float is a number that has a decimal in it. So for example, a variable called pi could be 3.14 something, 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 something. The fact is this has a decimal in it, so it is in fact a float. And if we do type pi, it'll tell us that it's a float. Now what the big difference here really is just that decimal point. That's all it is. That's the difference between a float and an integer. Now floats also allow us to do this nice little thing where we could say, let's create a large variable here. Large float is equal to, and again, let's just do some crazy number here. Dot some other crazy number. So I have no idea what this number is just by looking at it, but what I can do is I can add an underscore here, add one there, add one there, add one there. And now I can actually see what this number is. So we've got tens, thousands, millions, billions, and trillions, 123 trillion. Let's go ahead and run that, and let's run type on this as well. Large float. And it's still a float. Versus what could have happened before is if I just copy this entire thing over, and I replace this with commas, which is usually what we do when we're writing a number on paper, for instance. I do large float. Well, that looks like a tuple, doesn't it? Let's go back up here and let's run type on this and see what this is going to be. Sure enough, it's a tuple, and that's not what we want. So whenever you're dealing with large numbers, integers or floats, and remember a float just has a decimal point, that's the only differentiator here, is that instead of using a comma, you can use an underscore and it won't break your program.